All right, I hope you had a great session so far. And I think this is a topic that everyone's interested in. And if you're wondering what this is about CI/CD topics. So if this is something that you're not interested in, there are other exciting sessions. So for this exciting session, we actually have two colleagues from Neptune joining us today. We have Martin, who's been a long-term SAP mentor and expert, and he is joined by Thorsten, who is the chief architect of the Neptune ABAP practice, if I got this right. Yeah. And they are, as a back-end guy at heart, he really doesn't like to get sleepless nights over front-end problems. So if I understand correctly, he optimized the hell out of that, and he's nice enough to share that with us. So with that, take it away.
Thank you very much for the introduction. I hope you do not have all sleep problems. That would be too crowded for me. But yeah, our talk today has the topic better sleep through test automation using wdi5, BrowserStack, Git, and GitHub Actions. And as the introduction already said, my name is Martin Fischer. I'm heading the product management team at Neptune Software. And yeah, I'm not the expert on this topic, to be really honest. That's Thorsten, just to make that clear here. Yeah, the goal of automated tests actually is to get better sleep, in this case for Thorsten, especially on our release days, because in the past he was always, he had a lot of sleepless nights, and he wants to sleep like his little son again, cozy sleep. And yeah, he took the action himself and thought about a solution. Yeah, let's talk about why was that, yeah, where our needs to work on a solution on this one. So we as Neptune Software, we have actually one product, our digital experience platform, and this is a no-code, low-code platform with different single sign-on options, with a lot of authentication protocols we are supporting, and with web frontends and mobile clients, which makes it all very complex in the end if you think about test metrics, for example. Yeah, as I said, this results in countless different possibilities and combinations. And if you would, or if you execute tests in a manual way, that makes it very time consuming and complex. So the idea was to find a way how we can automate our tests on different browsers, different mobile devices, including UI5, and yeah, to make it all also smooth for us, integrated into our build pipeline, so that it's triggered all the time when we are releasing software. Or sleep, yeah, while sleeping, especially. Yeah, so Thorsten got his nights back now. No work during night hours anymore. Sorry for that. Yeah, again, deeper look on our setup. We have a platform that allows customers to create UI5 apps, either classical web apps or progressive web apps for mobile devices, or even yeah, for hybrid web app development. So meaning we offer the possibility to build Android apps and iOS apps in the end. And we, as the vendor in this case, we are providing the tools to build these apps. But there are more things that can go wrong. Of course, there's one source of error is our own coding, but we are relying on different technology like the Cordova version, the Cordova plugins, different variations of platforms. So talking about different operating systems on mobile devices, for example, and yeah, different UI5 versions. And in the end, our customers are developing their own coding on our platform, and that's also might in some cases also be a source of bugs maybe. So yeah, just to keep in mind, anything can go wrong at any time. And we also need to make sure, or we also need to be aware of that there is nothing like 100% security and error detection. So we can put as many logs around and test automation as we want. We will never find and cover everything. Here is a testing pyramid. No good developer, no good presentation at a developer conference without citing Martin Fowler, I think. So that's why I put that in. So who knows the testing pyramid? Most of you. Good. That's why you're in here. So we are focusing in this case on the service level more or less, not only UI testing, but also Thorsten will show more details on that, but we won't cover the unit testing area in this presentation. We also need to acknowledge, of course, we don't cover it all, but with the setup we already have, now we cover, or we get a lot more of sleep back in the end. We cover our main problem areas probably. So it's a huge step for us in the process of shipping and releasing software. And yeah, how it all began. Our problems were, we started as most of development teams probably do, with manual testing, and we just realized it's a really big effort at first already to define all the different combinations you might have, and then to execute all those tests. That led to the fact that we did the full scope testing usually only for our long-term stable releases and not for bugs, for bug fixes or patches. And thus that gave us some, probably quality issues in the end, because we shipped software which was not tested too good. And now Thorsten had a look into the solution, and I'm handing over to you.
Yeah, so to say again about our scenario, I mean, we started our end-to-end testing journey about 1.5 years ago. And I'm very excited about this topic because we are very exotic maybe on our approach. So we have this platform that allows you to create web applications, but also mobile applications. So really applications running on Android, on iOS. And even for this special setup, there is tools out there that allows you to run automation tests. So we are pretty excited. And I want to share with you the journey on how we got there. Maybe you can get a little bit of that excitement there as well. Of course, we started researching the technical aspect. We figured out how do you actually write good tests for UI5 applications. The starting point for that, of course, was wdi5. Very good presentation from Holger formally today. Volker, sorry. Which is, it allows you to very easily interact with the UI5 controls inside your application. Also, there is a easy to use UI5 test recorder that's built into the UI5 library itself, and even a Chrome extension nowadays, I think, that allows you to get the code snippets for the wdi5 flavor. So it's super easy to create these selectors. Then looking further, we figured out, okay, wdi5, it's not the full-blown test suite. It's actually an add-on or service for the surrounding test framework that's called WebDriver.io. So WebDriver is actually the testing framework for that tool. Then we looked further into WebDriver.io. We figured out, okay, there is add-ons possible there, so services, and wdi5 is not the only one. There's also other interesting services like Appium and BrowserStack. Looking at Appium, we then figured out it's also open source, and Appium allows you to test or automate real mobile phones, so either physically connected ones or emulators on your machine. So that is also a tool to remotely run tests on physical devices. And the interesting part, most interesting, is that it's not only for native apps, but also for hybrid web applications, like in our case, the Cordova platform. So running a web container as an app. Looking at BrowserStack, we figured out, okay, that's not only a cloud offering to run browser tests, but you can also run these Appium tests on real devices there. So that means you don't have to maintain a full fleet of mobile phones on your own and version them and update them. You can just spin up such a device in the cloud and run these tests there, which is still amazing, I think, that this technology exists. Yeah, and then the last point, of course, was, do I have to sit in front of my PC and press a button every day to execute the tests? No, a good way to automate this is with GitHub Actions and the workflows possibility there. So all of this got us really excited. We knew, okay, all the possible puzzle pieces are out there. We just have to combine them. And we knew, okay, every checkbox is ticked. We go that direction. Here again, an overview of the tools we use. So GitHub, of course, for the code maintenance, WebDriver IO, wdi5, BrowserStack, and Appium for the local app tests. So how did we then start putting this together? We did not start with the full detailed solution with the app running in BrowserStack. We just started with the local browser, very easy. So having our GitHub repository, we installed WebDriver IO and wdi5. And when it comes to these WebDriver IO tests, it's important to note that there's two main aspects to them. One being the configuration part, that's the conf files, and the specification part, that's the actual test scripts and your expectations. So the configuration part will tell WebDriver all the technical aspects, so meaning which services I want to use, for instance, wdi5 in this case, where are my spec files located, so pointing to these spec files, but also what is my target platform I want to run the tests on, so on a local browser, for instance. In our case, in the SAP edition, we render the UI5 applications on an SAP NetWeaver system. So in the end, when the local browser is spin up, it would just open the URL of our SAP NetWeaver system that renders the application, and there it then plays the test through. So that is the most basic setup we had. Next step, we wanted to get away from that necessity to have a local browser on your machine, but test on any browser, also Firefox or Safari on a Mac. That's where we then introduced BrowserStack into our tool chain. And the beauty about that is it's just an additional configuration part you add to your conf file. So the spec files, they don't care on which target platform they are executed. So you just change the configuration or create a new one and just add the BrowserStack service. The rest can stay the same. Also, what's very interesting as a feature in BrowserStack is this local tunneling that you see here. So in the end, BrowserStack spins up a browser in the cloud on a virtual machine somewhere, and that browser opens a URL. And to get away from the necessity that this URL must be publicly available, they offer this local tunneling. So the network calls from that browser instance that they get routed through the machine that initiated the test. So with that, you have possibilities to test local host scenarios when you have a local server running, but also internal VPN URLs. They are also possible with that. Now talking about this localhost stuff. So in our case, as I said earlier, we render the main application on the SAP NetWeaver system in the ICF, but our applications have also a lot of static assets. So we have quite some JavaScript files and CSS files that are necessary for our Neptune apps to run. And these we maintain, of course, in our GitHub repository. Normally, when the app is executed, they are served from the MIME repository in the SAP system. But when we develop and change these files, we want to test the local versions of them and don't want to need to upload them to the MIME repository. So that's why we introduced a localhost proxy in our setup, and that allows us to act as a man in the middle, you could say. So we can decide which network traffic goes to the SAP system, so like the main rendering of the app and the data communication, but the local static assets we fetch from the local file system. So we can test before deploying to the SAP system. And here's just an example URL, it's localhost, so executing the localhost proxy. how that looks like. In practice now, a little bit of code. How do you do that for the local browser scenario? On top, you see the WebDriver.io CLI command. So it's wdio run, and then pointing towards your configuration file. And the configuration file has a lot of options, all the technical aspects, but the most important ones are these three sections here. The services part, that's the array that tells WebDriver which add-ons or services I want to use. Then the specs array, that's the location of the test files. It's an array, and also you can use wildcards there, as you see. And the last point being the capabilities. So what is my target platform I want to execute the test? And also keep noted, it's an array here. So that means you can practically execute the same test at the same time on multiple platforms. So on a Chrome, on Firefox, this also works. And you see a couple of options. Also, Volker showed that in the session, Google Chrome options, where you can, for instance, execute it in headless mode so that you don't see that browser spinning up, but it still executes all the tests. Looking at a very basic spec file here, the main syntax that we chose is Mocha for WebDriver.io. It's with these describe and it blocks, how you structure the tests. Also, what we like using is one abstraction layer, you could say. So we like to use the page objects concept that hides a little bit of the complexity behind the scenes and makes the test more readable and also makes things reusable. So for instance, Launchpad open just opens our Launchpad with our URL scheme, and opening a tile is also just a method call. Then below you see the actual wdi5 interaction. So with the browser as control, you fetch the UI5 control and bring it to your fingertips in the Node.js context. And only thing you have to provide is the selector. And as I said earlier, there is a UI5 test recorder or a Chrome extension that helps you to easily get these selectors. Also, what we use in our case, what we like is TypeScript support. So you can also specify the UI5 control type that you expect. And since all of this is in TypeScript written, you would get IntelliSense and code completion. And no, you can use, that's now the beauty of wdi5, why I love it so much. You can just use the same methods in your test as if you would be in the browser context. At the end, there is some assertions. So we expect a certain text to have these characters. And at the very bottom, we introduced a quite new feature into our stack. That's the Percy snapshots. So that's an offering from BrowserStack that does visual comparison in the tests. So a test can fail either through a selector cannot be found. So that means the test doesn't know what to do, and expect is not met, or general bigger problems. So that's actually the problems that can occur. Now, again, that was the local browser setup. For the BrowserStack browser setup, you just have to change the configuration. You add the BrowserStack service on top. You provide your BrowserStack credentials that are necessary. And in the capabilities, this time you would specify the operating system for BrowserStack that it knows where to execute. Also, what's nice is it is not a static JSON or something like that. It is code that's executed. That means you can do some kind of inheritance concept, what we do also. So you can have some baseline configuration, and that you would import into this BrowserStack configuration, for instance, and then just do the additional changes on top of that. So this was now the browser variant. For our mobile clients, it is pretty much the same. So again, it is a hybrid web application running with Cordova, a UI5 application. So we can use the same wdi5 framework. We can use even use the same tests if we want. We just need to add, for a physically connected mobile phone or an emulator, we just need to add the Appium service to our configuration and run the same test if we want. Of course, the tests in these cases are slightly different because you have authentication up front. You might have biometric authentication, but all of this is also possible. And for the BrowserStack variant, that was then in more easy step. It's also, again, exchanging the service, adding the BrowserStack, and you execute the same Appium test in the cloud on a machine, on a device in the cloud, in the data center. For the configuration, pretty straightforward. The local device scenario, you add Appium. The most important parameters are the platform name, so you specify Android or iOS. And in the Appium app property, you point towards the binary. So Appium will also install the app that you have on your machine on the device. So that's also automated by Appium. For the BrowserStack version, you just would add BrowserStack, pretty similar. Also, it reuses these Appium settings. The only bigger difference is that the Appium app is now not a file that you have stored on your machine, but you have to upload that upfront to BrowserStack and get such a URI in return. And then BrowserStack would know, this is now the app I need to install on the phone and execute a test later on. Now, the biggest part to our whole journey was actually this app testing stuff, because if it's an app that's executed and that can change, you would need to create that app, of course. And do I have to do that all manually again and again? That is not a nice pipeline. So we offer you in our platform all the possibilities to create these apps and deploy them with an MDM or with an app store or Android Google Play Store. And that's done in multiple steps. So first you would create a zip file in the Cordova project. And so that contains the Cordova project in our so-called cockpit. You download that. You would then use another service called Mobile Build Service that we offer for free for our customers and partners. You upload the zip file and get the APK and IP or IPA as return. You can download. You would then upload these files to BrowserStack that they are available there, and then execute the actual test in the end. And since we are having these tools already in place in our cockpit and they are API driven, it was a matter to just connect these API calls. So we created an end-to-end pipeline that would do all these steps in a GitHub action workflow that is doing this build process all at once. And then we have now our full end-to-end pipeline. Keep in mind, though, that this process is not a real CI thing maybe on push, because it takes some time. So the building process to create the zip file, building the APK, that all takes a little bit. So we do that only in cron jobs. I can show you later that. I can show you now that. So now it's the demo part. Let's see. So first off, I want to show you our GitHub world. And there we have basically two repositories, one and also two worlds. So the first world is that web world, testing the web app scenario that we can also use in a CI process, so on a push scenario, for instance. And the other one is the end-to-end app world. And these two worlds have two repositories. So the web world has the DXP SAP Edition repository. There we also maintain our static assets, our JavaScript files, and that one also has this localhost proxy I showed earlier. Looking now at the actions, how they are executed, we have also some Mocha tests running there, and here we have our end-to-end tests. Looking at that YAML file, how you specify these GitHub workflows, you see also we schedule them on a cron job basis, because our web version is rendered and maintained still in an SAP NetWeaver system that we don't yet catch on a Git push. So we need to test that regularly. Still, we have also the push trigger here. So when there's a push to this repository, the test would kick off. As well as with that workflow dispatch option, you can also manually trigger that just from the GitHub Actions page. And you can also, what's nice, provide input parameters. And what we did here is give you the options in BrowserStack, so you can decide where do you actually want to run it. And I can just kick that off now that you see that in action. Run workflow, and here on the right-hand side, that's now the workflow dispatch. With all these properties, I can choose Mac, Windows, operating system, browser type, and the version of that. And I can just kick it off. Now keep in mind, this runs in the GitHub world. So it's not my local machine. And also this would run at night when I'm at sleep. and also on push. So when the colleagues change stuff here. So this is now the web part of it. Looking at the end-to-end repository, that contains the full pipeline stuff with the app creation. We again have a GitHub Actions workflow section. And we have multiple LTS releases, and for these we have multiple GitHub workflows. So we have an SAP system containing our latest and greatest. And when we branch out to an old LTS version, we have a system copy in an older SAP system. So for this, we have another workflow in our case. Now, looking at that example here for the full end-to-end. So here we want to test our mobile clients, our mobile versions, with the various authentication types we offer. So as Martin said, we have a lot of single sign-on capabilities, Azure, Okta, with biometrics and without biometrics with a PIN code. And here you see all these test scripts that refer to a reference mobile client that we call. And we do it in a matrix. So we do two at the same time so that it's a little bit faster. And as I said, it takes quite some time. So this is a scheduled flow. Still, I can dispatch it manually here if I want to. In addition to that, we also have a single run that is pretty much the same. But here we offer you, so that's on workflow dispatch. Here we offer you the possibilities to say which test do I now want to run? So which mobile client should be created and what Android device, what Android version and what iOS device and iOS version should it execute on? Probably it's not finished until the end of the session, but let's see. And the same we would have for our 22 LTS version. So now going to BrowserStack, to look at the end result, of course, you see a lot of feedback already in the GitHub Action. So GitHub Action would show you all the, so this is our pipeline. It's creating the stuff. And here at the bottom, you see the same logic. If you have attended the wdi5 session, the same end result where it's running on and which tests it performed and if they were passing or not. But now looking at more interesting things in the BrowserStack world, they have also two corresponding sections, one being the automate and one being the app automate. So the automate is the browser version of that. And you actually see a few seconds ago, the test I executed, you see that's currently running on a Chrome instance, and you even get a live feed, so you can watch what's happening. You see on the text logs which steps are performed. And here you see that video, you see what it's clicked on in that list, as well as you have network logs. So you see even on the network level what's going on.
So that's how you spend your days till you install that, or?
Yes, exactly. And yeah, I love it. And you see here also that the local testing is enabled. If can I make that bigger, maybe? So you would see that this is running in localhost URL, and the localhost is now the GitHub runner that executed the test. And the main rendering of the app is then guided through to the SAP system that renders the apps in our low-code platform. But the files necessary for it are the ones used from the GitHub repository. So now that is the web version. Looking at the app automate, the other part, it is pretty similar. Oh, wait. Why don't I see that? Products. Where is the app automate? Automate. There we go. So that's app automate now. And it has pretty much the same possibilities. So you see all the builds on the left-hand side, they correspond to our various mobile clients and towards our SAP systems. And you get then in the end the sessions, you see it's running on iOS and on Android, and you have a lot of possibilities to control these mobile phones. So you see also a video feed. You see also the network logs. But even what's possible is if there's like native pop-ups coming up, you can interact with these. You can set the device offline. You can change the geo coordinates of it. You can upload images in the camera simulating things, biometrics. In our case, we bring up a Safari browser for the OAuth flow, and you can change the context to interact in the WebDriver framework now with the controls in that web view. And once that's executed, it goes down and we go back to our UI5 application and continue working there. So you see the full power of wdi5 for all of these tools combined together. That's why I'm so excited about what's possible. Yes, the last tool I want to show with you or share with you, that is the Percy screenshot or Percy snapshot. That is also an offering from BrowserStack. So that is doing these visual comparisons. So of course, in WebDriver, in these spec files, you have your expectations, so your assertions, what you say should happen. But still, there can happen so many things that it looks different, that the UI element is now hidden or something. And that's a big circle still that is not covered in that huge amount of problems. And for that, we like to use the Percy framework. And when you, in your spec files, place that Percy snapshot command, it would trigger these snapshots that are uploaded to the Percy toolset. And you see if there have been visual changes or not. No visual changes, all good, sleep good. If there's changes, you would see that. And it takes screenshots on, again, various browser types and various pixel things, and would let you know if something has visually changed. And actually, just that test gave now an issue. I don't know why. That's the demo god, I guess. And it is very tightly integrated into GitHub, as you see. So it shows you which commit and which branch it was happening that these screenshots have been made. So that even covers like the visual aspect of testing. So in the end, with this whole tool set automation pipeline, we can have the web tests. So when we do our regular changes on our code base, deploy and test our solution there with screenshot, with visual comparison. But also we cover now our authentication mechanisms with these mobile client tests, where we even really every night create such a new mobile client and upload it to a device. And if there's an iOS beta coming out, I can just change a little setting and it would just run all these tests. I can reuse all of them again. And I can hopefully sleep better. If there's bugs, of course, we need to change them and address them. But it's, so from our experience, it's a one-time investment maybe to set all of this up. But you pretty early get to a break-even point where you say it was worth it. So that's at least for us already happened maybe after a year or so when we started with our journey. I think that's it from my side. Questions?
Any questions?
Yes.
Yeah, the question was if there is a PDF test report in the end, if I got you right, where you can see all the test results in the end for documentation reasons.
Yeah. So what they have in BrowserStack is the possibility. I mean, they have a good Git integration. So within such a session, I can report a bug here on top, you see, and that would connect to our Git repositories and would open an issue and would give you all the information on the test as well as the URL to it. So the documentation part is actually a public URL. I can show you. Here you see that public link. If I copy that, and I don't even need to have a BrowserStack user, I can share that with whoever developer out there. And if he opens that link, he gets to that same session. So that's the documentation part of things, which is pretty cool, I would say. In addition, what they have is the test observability, or how that's called. That's a new feature that gives you a little more reporting of your test runs and the flakiness. And so it would recognize the same builds or sessions, how flaky they are and which tests you can maybe improve. And I think there's possibilities also to create a PDF or something. It is a paid service, though, that I have to mention. For open source projects, if you apply, I think it's free. I think wdi5 itself is doing that, right? Yeah. If it's like private repositories, in our case, it's a paid service, of course. Yeah. The Percy one, not. You have a couple of free screenshots, 9,000 free screenshots a month, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, you can take the mic.
Thanks for the presentation. Any visuals on the comparison with Percy? Is there anything that you can share?
Yeah, sure. I mean, let me bring that up again. So what we do in our case, I don't know why this now shows as a lot of changes. Maybe I show you one where we had a tiny little change. So this is the visual comparison. It compares always against a baseline. So you can either decide which branch should be my baseline, or it automatically takes the same branch as the baseline. And when you approve a change with that button, then this new commit will be your new baseline. And it has various tools. Of course, it allows you to see that in this red. You don't see that well here. But if I maybe show it like this, in this case, we had a change of the date. You might spot it. Date D 01/01/2011, 31/05/25, and that was catched. You can also control the sensibility of that comparison thing in Percy, but that's a paid feature. And it's then again on various, so we have 5 screenshots in this case, but one of them has a change. So that's why it shows up like this. And our screenshots normally are like integration cards, so big stuff we want to see if something changed there. Other integration cards, a PDF to show if that works and renders correctly, because how would you test if that works with not like visual comparison, and the entry screen.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Is it possible for us to have the presentation later?
Yeah.
Any access?
I think so. Klar.
Thanks.
I'm sure they will be shared, and I think even the recording of the session, so you can maybe run it slower to understand all the different features we are testing. Further questions?
Thank you for having a second question. My question would be, how complex is, for example, when a new button or table is added, to integrate this in an already created test scenario? So do you have this add manually with a click on this button and then click this dialog or something, or did it fetch directly from GitLab so you don't have to do it manually?
You still have to write these tests on your own. So you have to tell it which buttons to press and so on and so forth. But that's a good point. You have to ensure when you have your test scenario that it should be quite stable. So if you test, let's say, on a database table where the database entries change and you might get different results and do your expects on input fields or whatever, that's not a good test setup. So in a good testing environment, you would try to have a pretty stable test. Of course, if you introduce new buttons, then you might want to test them as well, and so also change the test. But that's a manual step you have to do. Yeah.
Okay, and the follow-up question, how to interact with an unstatic element, like when it's generated in UI5 every time new, how to get this element that this field is clicked and not another GUI element or something, because that's a bit struggling what I had when I created some testing.
That's a very good point. I mean, with the selector options, you have quite flexible approaches to it. normally the DOM is like a complex mess in UI5, and that's the beauty of the wdi5 with these selectors. It allows with the record replay to get easy hold on these things, and you can access them through area labels and with suffix things and stuff. If all of this doesn't work, then it's even possible to call, maybe with that wormhole that has been introduced, just call it indeed as a JavaScript version to get rid of very dynamic things. I think there's ways to do it. Of course, if it's so dynamic, it might be more challenging to have a test.
Okay, thank you. That's all. And thank you for the nice presentation.
Any further questions? Volker?
Also, we are at the booth, so just jump off and
if there
sessions about
have
automation.
further questions about digesting what Thorsten presented, you can visit it as at the booth and even take some merch if you want to. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And as you walk out and think about how to automate your job away, enjoy the rest of your day. I'm already having great plans with what I just learned. So see you later tonight for the closing keynote and the rest of the show. Have fun, guys.
Thank you.